So not so long ago I came across this post by Louis Bizarro, and this is a really cool effect. As you can see, these images are just coming closer to you as you're scrolling down. They're kind of like scaling and tilting. It's just a cool 3D scroll animation. And as you can see, I simply recreated it inside of Framer without writing a single line of code. And you might be asking, how the hell can you do something like this inside of Framer just by drawing rectangles and without writing any code? And in this video I want to teach you that. I actually want to teach you it in a way that then later you can build literally any sort of 3D scroll animation. So we're going to talk about how to structure scroll animations like this, how to set up like 3D structures, so you like put elements in 3D space, because as you can see, it's real 3D. Like it has like perspective distortion as elements come closer, they get bigger and stuff like that. And we're going to also talk about how we can, connect our scroll progress to these different transforms. So as you can see, as I'm scrolling down, the elements are actually moving closer to us, so we're going to talk about how we can do that as well. So yeah, a bunch of knowledge in one video, which is completely free, a little bit unbelievable, but it is what it is. My name is Nandi, this is Film University, and let's get started. So before we jump into creating the actual effect, I want to tell you that this project is going to be remixable. I'm going to leave a link in the description. You can click that and you can see the final thing. You're going to see it here on the home page on the left. But I highly encourage you to follow along with the video and actually build it with me, because if you just copy this to your project then you didn't learn anything, and if you follow along, now you're going to be able to do this in the future for yourself, which is pretty cool in my opinion. So if you want to follow along, just go to the starter and you're going to see exactly what I'm seeing right here and just start building with me. So in the first section of the video, I'm going to just build the base, the structure that we need. So let's start with that. By default, we just have 3 breakpoints: desktop, tablet, and phone. And that's basically it, nothing crazy. So what we usually do when we start building sites is we turn the desktop into a layout on the right panel. This just makes it a stack, which allows us to create frames within, and these frames will be absolutely positioned, which is not true because they are relatively positioned, as you can see here, which means that we can just duplicate them and everything is nicely positioned according to the stack settings. But I don't want to go deep into that. If you don't know what are stacks, relative, absolute, fill, fit, blah blah blah, if you don't know these, make sure to check out some of my beginner tutorials that you can find on my channel. So now that the desktop is actually a stack, we can set the stack settings to vertical, start, and gap 0. We also make sure that the padding is 0, by the way. Then we create a frame, which is going to be the main container on the website. So we also give it a tag, which is going to be main. This will be set to fill. We're going to give it a 3000 or actually 4000 pixel height. And now we can set the desktop to fit height. And hopefully the tablet and phone will adjust, but it seems like for some reason they stay fixed. So I'm just going to set them to fit as well. So now these breakpoints are fitting the content within, which is the main container. I can remove the fill color from the main container, and I can turn that as well into a stack with this little button. And here the stack settings will be the same. There should be start and gap 0. So now we have the main container. Each section will be within this, so we can add the first section, which is, the hero section, what we see right here. So I'm going to just draw a frame here, and it is going to be called hero. The way we're going to be setting up the hero section is going to be slightly different than usual, because it's going to be super long. Because in order to get this effect, we have to make sure that we have a sticky frame on the top of the website within the hero section, to make sure that as we are scrolling down, we're actually not really seeing like a real scroll that we usually see on websites, like everything is like scrolling up, but rather it's just, as you can see, for example, this scroll text here also just stays in the viewport because it's also within the sticky frame. The reason why we do this is because then we have everything sticky, so we can start adding scroll transforms to that. So as we're scrolling down the website, things are getting transformed and they are just moving around. So in order to set up this structure, we have to create one large frame. This will define the length of the sticky effect. This will be the hero section, so it's going to be large, meaning 3000 pixels, let's say, and the width will be fill, no fill color, and then this will also be a stack with distribute start and gap 0. Now within the hero, we're going to create the sticky frame. So this frame will be actually, what holds everything, right? Everything within the hero that are actually sticky. So the width here will be fill and stack again. Most frames are stacks. And then the height here will be 100 VH, which means that it will always take up 100% of the given viewport height. So this stack will be called sticky. And then on the right, in order to get this to a real sticky behavior, I'll have to set the type to not absolute, not relative, but sticky. So now we can also test it really quickly. We just place a little frame here. We're going to set it to black. And I can start scrolling down, and indeed, for the length of the 3000 pixel hero section, this frame within indeed stays sticky, which is exactly what we need. Great. Now we have this. And what you have to know about sticky though is that only things that are placed within the sticky will be sticky. If we have something outside of the sticky, so if we place an element here, let's say this red little line, it's not within the sticky frame, it's outside of that, within the hero. Now that will be actually scrolling, as you can see. So the element that is placed within the sticky frame stays within the viewport. Elements outside of that are scrolling away. And this will be really useful for us because we can use these little things that are scrolling away as scroll triggers. So for example, I can say that whenever this white stripe hits the top of the website, so it reaches this point here, some sort of animation happens on this little square. It goes to the right, to the left, or to the top. If I wanted to make something simple, but of course, we want to make something a little bit crazier. But that's just the, the underlying structure that we need for this effect. So that's that. I will just now remove these elements here, and yeah, I think that's it for the structure. Now, for further developing the structure, I'll now grab these images and I'll place them within the sticky. But before I do that, let me just create another little frame within the sticky. This will be called 3D space. Things start getting a little interesting, right? 3D space, what's that? Well, I'm going to set it to width fill and height fill, so it's always adapting to this sticky frame, which is its parent. And I'm going to remove its fill color. I'm going to set it to a layout, so everything within will be relatively positioned. And I'll also remove the gap, just set it to 0. So you could be asking, what the hell is a 3D space? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hold down Option on my keyboard and drag this here, just to show you what is like a 3D space. Why do we need that setup? So if we have a frame like this little image inside a framer, we can start adding transforms to it on the right panel under the transforms section. So if you click here, you can see that we're going to scale, rotate, depth, and a bunch of like interesting properties. Well, what I'm going to show you right now is what happens if we rotate this. Well, you can see I can start rotating this, nothing crazy. However, we have a 3D section here where I can start rotating it in 3D space. So let's say I rotate it like this. And in theory, it should be rotating in 3D, and it is actually rotating in 3D. However, as you can see, it looks really flat. And the reason why this happens is because this element here is not within the 3D space. I mean, it's within the 3D space, but it doesn't really have perspective distortion. So the way we can set up a common 3D space for all of these images with perspective, what we have to do is we have to set the 3D space on their parent. So this frame that we created will be selected, and on the right panel we're going to click transforms and we're going to add perspective. And as you can see, this is not enough. We also have to add another property which is called preserve 3D, This just basically makes sure that everything that is within this frame, so all the images, will be within the same 3D space. Like we just preserve the 3D environment. As you can see, as I click that, we immediately see a much better 3D effect. And now it is indeed, rotating in 3D, we see the perspective distortion. And in fact, if we change the perspective value to lower values, the distortion will be much stronger. With higher values, it's a little less, intense. What you also have to understand about this setup is that it's really important to set this up on this large, parent frame, because what we could also do alternatively is we could just set it on the image itself. We can remove it from here, and we can set it on the image perspective. The problem with this is that now this image has its 3D space, and if I create another image here, these two images are now not within the same 3D space. They both have their own 3D context, which is not really great, and I'll show you why. If we set both of these to 90 rotation, now they are rotated in a way that we cannot really see them. As you can see, they're just we're seeing the edge, which is not visible. As you can see, now we just cannot see them. And if I start moving, for example, this left one to the side with my arrow keys, I'm just moving it. Now it's right here. I can move even more. Boom, 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 boom. It's now here. We still cannot see it. But in the real 3D space, if we have, let's just show it with this little, what is this, touchpad or what? I don't know. Yeah, I guess. So I can really easily show you, in real 3D space, if I start moving this right now, you can see its edge. But if I move it to the side, it starts revealing its side. You're now seeing more of its, I don't know, with right side, I guess. For me, it's the left, but for you, I think it's the right. If I move it to the right, you're seeing its side. If I move it to the other side, you're seeing more of its other side. So, because now we're setting the 3D context on the image, this is not really happening. And this is why you have to set the 3D context on the parent. Let me show you the difference. I'm going to remove the perspective distortion from these images, and I'm going to instead implement it on the 3D space frame, which is their parent. So perspective, as you can see now, this is revealed. We can see the side. As I move it to the center, we see less and less. And here in the center, we're going to see almost nothing. And then on the other side, we're seeing the other side. Pretty cool. And if I start moving this one with episode positioning to the side, we're revealing a little bit of its right side. So as you can see, this is now a real 3D space. And this is again why we have to make sure that we set it on the parent. So everything within will be in this common 3D space. Okay, so now that we know this, we can remove these two example images. I'm going to set the perspective to 1200. I think that's going to be enough, maybe 1000. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to place in all of these images and somehow set up a structure that looks like this, which will not be easy. That will be a little bit more complicated, but I'm going to try to explain it to you really clearly. So I'm going to grab all of them, place them on this little breakpoint. So now they're within the 3D space. What I'm going to do with them now is I'm going to wrap them in a stack. So I'm going to select all of them. I'm going to either right click after selecting them and clicking add stack. But if you're a fan of shortcuts like me, you can just press Option, Command and Enter on your keyboard. This is what I'm going to do. So now you can see that we have wrapped all of these in a stack, and we can call this images because we have all the images within this stack. Then what I'm going to do is, well, I don't know if I want to adjust this gap for now. I think we're going to set it to 0. And then the images width will be fit content. So this stack is actually fitting the content within, which is all the images. So now what I'm going to do is I'm gonna rotate all of these images in 3D space. So I'm gonna select all of them, and then I'm gonna add transform, rotate, 3D, and I'm gonna add a 90-degree Y rotation. Now we cannot even see them. Then I'm gonna rotate this images frame 90 degree, same rotation I did 3D and 90. And as I'm rotating this, you can see that we can't really see anything. And the reason why we cannot see anything is because this preserve 3D is adding on the 3D space level, but in order to make sure that all of these images are indeed in the same common 3D context, we have to set this preserve 3D on all levels of wrapping. So previously, when we just had two images within the 3D space, we didn't have this problem, but now we have another layer of wrapping, which is the images level. As you can see, it's kind of like a little folder within a folder. We have the 3D space folder, and then we have images folder within that. And so in order to have the 3D space or 3D context kept, we have to set preserve 3D on the images layer as well. So I'm going to do that. Preserve 3D, and look at that. We already see it. Pretty good. So now, as you can see, as I start rotating it 90 degrees, we kind of see what we want to see, right? Like, this is what I see right here. Exactly. Which is really great. So now all I have to figure out is how the hell am I gonna like animate them like this? Because when you do something in Framer, when you want to create an effect, you have to think about, okay, now that I have this set up, what property can I animate to achieve the effect that I want to achieve? Well, there's a property called depth, which moves elements closer to X along the Z axis, which is kind of what we need, but not really. But the problem with that is that it cannot be animated with the scroll transform effect. As you can see, scroll transform effect only has access to opacity, scale, rotation, 3D rotation, offset, skew. We don't really have depth. So it's going to be a little bit hard to set this up. However, what we're going to also make sure that we do is we set the X back to 0. We're not going to set the X rotation here on this level because it will mess this up a little bit. What we're going to do instead is we're going to set it to 0. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap the images in another wrapper frame. So I'm going to just press Option, Command, and Enter. Now images is wrapped in stack. Again, Preserve 3D will be applied here because this is a new folder or a new layer of wrapping. I'm going to call this Images Wrap. And it will also be set to with fit content. So now on this images wrap, I'll be able to set the 3D transform, or sorry, like a 3D rotation. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just rotate it in 3D. As you can see, it's going to have like maybe 90 degrees like this. The reason why I'm doing this, you might be a little bit confused, like we have rotated it 90 degrees and now you're rotating it more. The reason why I'm doing this is because now if this images stack on the right panel has a scroll transform, and we click the from state, for example, and we set the opacity to 1, the scale to 1, and we start adjusting the offset X, as you can see now it's bringing it closer to us and further away from us instead of moving it left and right, because X offset would normally just move it left and right. But because of our smart setup with this images wrap, because this rotates the whole thing 90 degrees, now it is kind of like adding a depth effect, moving it closer and further away from us. So again, just to show you, if this is set to a different rotation, transform X looks a little bit more like a transform X, moving it to the left and to the right. But because we've rotate this wrapper frame 90 degrees, now X actually means kind of like a depth. Pretty cool. But now things are rotated in a little weird way. We have to rotate this even further. Now it looks great. This is how it should look. And the X still means coming closer and further away from us. Now, all I have to think about is, if I add this, which layer can I transform to make sure that it's tilted a little bit? I think the images wrap is the one, so I'm going to rotate it like this. X rotation in 3D. Maybe 16. I don't know what's the exact value there, but let's just go with 16 and go back here to scroll transform. And yeah, as you can see, if I adjust now the X offset, it's kind of like going along this little line and perfectly in 3D space. And yeah, this is exactly what we need, so it's actually perfect. So yeah, this is gonna be, I think, the setup that we need. I don't think that we need anything else. So now we can really focus on the animation part. How can we actually add these animations and connect them to the scroll? So what we know for sure is that we have to select this images stack, and we have to apply this transform to it, which animates it along the x-axis. So we can set the start state to opacity 1, scale 1, and then the to state is going to be some sort of x offset, maybe something like this, like maybe 1000 minus 1000. So everything just comes closer to us. The trigger is going to be not on scroll. You might say that, hey, like we want to animate it on scroll. Yes, indeed. However, on scroll is a trigger that makes the animation play out from the top of the page to the bottom of the page, which is not great, right? Because you might have this on a landing page, which is super long, and then the animation will be longer. It's going to play out slower. If you have a smaller site, it's going to be faster. So you have no control over, I mean, you have control over, but yeah, you are impacting your scroll animation by adding new sections to the page, which I don't know if you get it, but it's not really a great thing. So on scroll, let's forget that. What we need to use is section in view. Why? Because then we can create little sections, little hidden trigger frames, and we can set the size of those sections. And based on the size of those sections, we can define how long the animation plays out, how fast it is, how slow it is. So yeah, that's gonna be it. We're gonna also add this transition here to make it a little smoother. And we have to select the section that we want to trigger with. Well, we don't really have a section yet, so let's create that. As I mentioned, if something is placed below the sticky frame, that will scroll away. So I'll give it a little color just so we'll see. We're going to set this to fill width, and the height will be, I don't know, 2500 pixels maybe. And it's going to be a layout, which means that it's a stack, zero gap, start, and yeah, we're going to just call it images movement, because this will be used for moving the images. And I can also copy the layer name, and I can on the right panel assign a scroll section to it with the same name. This means that now if we select the scroll animation that we added here, or the scroll transform, now we can select the actual section here. So the animation from the from state to the to state will now play out as this comes into the view. As you can see, as we scroll down, it starts coming into the view, and yeah, slowly this just plays. Something really weird is happening though, which is the fact that, as you can see, the scroll trigger is longer than the sticky, so it was still like moving when the sticky ended, which is not great. So what I have to do is probably I should make this fill, right? So it fills up the available space within the hero section. So basically this frame right here. So now I scroll down and it stops, and then we can, scroll away. Perfect. And then of course we'll later just set the opacity to 0 so we cannot see that actually something is scrolling in the background. So you would already say that, okay, great, thank you Nandi, this looks amazing, but let's just take it to the next level and learn a little bit more about these scroll triggers. Because as you can see it here, we're not only moving them, but as they start coming a little bit closer, we actually pull them out. Like we're just saying that, come here, come closer. And it also starts like tilting. So this is what we're gonna do, just to add that little extra effect. So The way we're going to do that is we're going to add those scroll transforms on the individual images. So I select this one, for example, and I go on the right, effects, scroll transform, and it's going to again trigger a section in view. We're going to create the section a little bit later. From state, 1 opacity, 1 scale, and the to state will be simply 3D rotation. Just going to flip it like this. However, something really weird is happening here. The rotation is, it's basically the image is rotating around the center point. But on here, if you pay close attention, it is actually rotating from this point. Like from this line, it kind of rotates. So like it's fixed here and it rotates like this and not from here. Hopefully you can see that. And this is a really important difference. So in order to make sure that this is doing the same thing here, we have to add a new property to these images. I'm going to select all of them on the left. On the right, under transforms, we're going to add the origin points for the transformations, which by default is 50-50, which means we go 50% along the x-axis and 50% along the y, and we end up in the center. If you want to move up here, we just have to go x 50 and y 0. So y is going to be set to 0. So now if I select this and I preview the to state, now we can see that the X rotation looks much better. Now the origin point is right here on the top line. Perfect. We're not only rotating it, but we're also pulling it out a little bit. So the X offset will be adjusted a little bit. So maybe, actually, I don't know, maybe 300. Let's test that. And let's create the trigger frame that triggers this transform. So within the image's movement, I can place another frame, which is going to be, I don't know, red-ish. And this will be set to width fill. And the height will be viewport, maybe 50. And we're going to call this image 1. So this triggers a movement on the first image. We're going to also add the scroll section here on the right so that we can connect it to a scroll effect. Okay, select the first image, and now I'm going to add the section here, image 1, and I'm going to also add the transition as usual. So now, as you can see, it looks really great. It kind of like pulls it away, looks really cool. And what I can do is I can just, in theory, add the new sections like image 2, call it image 2. You can also add image 3, call it image 3. Both on the layers panel, so we can visually see everything in terms of the trigger sections, and also on the scroll section on the right to make sure that we will able to select it from the drop down when we're adding the scroll transforms. So everything is renamed. I might also change these colors slightly so we can see the difference. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to probably just copy the effect from the first image by selecting it, pressing down Command and K, and searching for copy effects. And I just press enter, and I will select all the other images and paste effects. So then all I have to do now is just select each one and change the section that triggers the effect, because I guess everything else will be the same. But maybe not, we'll see. So let's see what happens now. Yeah, looks pretty good. However, something weird is happening here. The effect on the last image is still playing when we actually already ended the sticky effect. As you can see, it starts scrolling away. I think the reason for this is because all these images have scroll transform connected to... Okay, sorry, I just realized this is not the problem. I thought that the viewport is messed up, but no. I think the reason again is because... Okay, so sorry, it's just funny that it's actually not the problem, but it can actually be the problem because here, for example, on this breakpoint, the image 4's trigger is longer than the sticky. So what I will do to make sure to future-proof this is I'm going to set the hero to fit instead of fixed. But for that, I'll just set the height of images movement to fixed, maybe, yeah, 2200, and then the hero will be fit. Okay, hopefully this will make sense. And also on the images movement, we might set this to fit. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, I'm pretty much satisfied with this effect. I'm pretty much satisfied. Great. One little thing that you might notice is that if I scroll really fast, you can kind of see that this last image is cropping on the bottom here. That's not really nice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the sticky frame. I'm going to apply overflow visible. So meaning the overflowing parts will be visible. This is and it's still hidden. Why? I don't know. Probably we have some sort of wrapper frame. Yeah, I mean, of course, because the images are within the images stack, which is visible. Great. Within the images wrap, which is visible. Within the 3D space, which is visible. Within the sticky, which is visible, and within the hero, which is clip. Okay, let's set that to visible as well. I cannot do anything else. Okay. Okay, now it's great. Okay, now it's perfect. Cool. Okay, cool, great. So the last thing is also fixed. So we learned how to set up the structure, how to animate things with scroll transforms, connecting the animations to these hidden trigger frames. And we sort of, I hope that you kind of get that we sort of created a little timeline, because in the first trigger frame is on the top, the second is on the bottom, or sorry, below. So first the red triggers the first image, then the purple, the next one, and it's kind of like a timeline, but it's not horizontal but vertical, which is pretty exciting and interesting in my opinion. But what we can do now is we can just select the image's movement, which is the main kind of like trigger frame, and we can set the opacity 0. That's it. It's no longer visible. The only thing we see now is the crazy effect, which can take our size to the next level, I think. So yeah, I think that's it for this video. I don't think that we need to do anything else. You might ask, okay, now we have this, how do I add a new section to the site? Well, you just press F, create a frame, and then press Command X, and then paste it within the main, right? Below the hero. And that's it. So this can have a little different color, just so we see the difference. And then I'm going to set it to fill and viewport height. And I'm going to just write a little text here. Sorry, not here, but here. And you're going to see that if we scroll down and we kind of like reach the end of the scroll container or the sticky effect, we're going to see that new section with the text, which we cannot really see. I don't know why. Let's see if the desktop is set to fit. Yes, the main is set to height fixed, which is not great. We need fit. So now it is going to work. Okay. Okay, so yeah, it's pretty funny. It's totally fine that we run into this, because you'll probably run into these things if you're building stuff. But yeah, now that we have, you know, all of those overflow visibles, now this is right here, which doesn't really look great. So in order to fix this, what we're gonna do is we're gonna set this back to hidden. So this sticky will be actually hidden. So now our clip, which is kind of like hidden, now it's, you know, gonna crop still. But in order to fix this, what I'm gonna do a little trick. On the images movement, we're gonna add the little bottom padding, maybe like 400 pixels. So we still are in the sticky, even when we completed the animation for a little while. So let's check how this looks if we scroll fast. We still see cropping if we scroll really fast, so maybe make that padding a little bit more, like 600 pixels. But I think that's the max that I want to do. It still kind of crops, and now at this point you can decide if that's a problem for you. If it is, then you can select all the images and you can play with the X value, so you're maybe pulling them a little bit more out of their position. Yeah. So now, as you can see, that clipping is no longer really visible. But yeah, as you can see, when it comes to like finalizing and really putting those finishing touches to these animations, you really have to play around with these different values to make sure it really looks the way you want it to look. But yeah, we discussed now how we can add that new section below the effect once we're done with everything. So yeah, I think that's it for this video. I really do hope that it was helpful and you were able to learn about scroll transforms, scroll animations, and 3D inside of Framer. If you have any questions or you got stuck somewhere, make sure to drop a comment down below. I'm going to do my best to answer you guys. Also, if you want to learn more about Framer, if you're looking for cool resources, remixes, similar scroll effects or little components that you can remix and use on your Framer website, make sure to go to the framer.university website. It has a bunch of free resources. So yeah, if you're a user of Framer or you're just learning, it's probably going to be a great source for you. So yeah, that's for this video. Make sure to like it, subscribe for more, and I'm going to see you in the next one.